Good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Autistics in the Workplace. I am your host, Tiffany Daniels, and we are getting back to that article and the split between on the managerial side as well as on the autistic side. We're covering the managerial side today because thankfully I got all my videos done on time for once so I could just knock it one day after the other instead of killing myself right before an extremely important stream, which we'll be going over briefly. The U.S. Congress has decided to try to sneak in an addendum to the current agricultural bill that has been recently passed through the subcommittee that will essentially strip the FDA of all its powers to be able to decide whether or not a medical device can continue to be used or not. Let me put it bluntly for you. The United States Congress is telling us that they hate me and every single other autistic out there who dares to breathe while being autistic, all right? And before you try to come on here and tell me it's the Republicans, here's a little news flash for you. Some inconvenient facts. Who holds the majority right now? Because it isn't the Republicans. When I tell you I don't trust either side, that is because their actions have justified that stance over and over and over again. When I tell you all this arguing and all this bullshit they float through the media is all for show, it's all theater, this is exactly what I mean. The only way you can get a politician to do the right thing is if you have something to hold over their heads. Okay? This becomes all the more true during election cycles, which is why you will find that during election cycles is when advocates like myself are going to be at our most busy. I'll sleep when I'm dead. So we're going to be going over that recent news, what tools and tricks and what we are asking for those who wish to join us to fight this insanity. All the pertinent things in regards to that stuff during tonight's stream. But before all that, now let's get back. We're going to the managerial side of autistics in workplace. What's beyond autism awareness? I chose that specific title because nobody in the neurotypical world knows. Okay? Especially when it comes to after the transition age between high school and higher education or the workforce. Okay? So let's get to it, shall we? All right. Conversation, initiation, and maintenance. Before we start reading, I want to this is personal. A lot of autistics have the same issues I do with it, but it's not always across the board. What neurotypicals call conversation, initiation, and maintenance is small talk. Are we good at faking small talk as a way to reassure neurotypicals? I still cannot to this day wrap my brain around how essentially sweet little nothings is some form of reassurance to neurotypicals because I tend to prefer something a little bit more concrete in order for me to feel secure in any situation. But that's just your literalness talking. Well, you know what, Karen? The neurotypical world could use a whole fuck ton, pardon my language, folks, of literalism right now, okay? All right, for the disclaimers. Folks, when you come to this channel, it is marked not for kids for a reason. We use profanity on occasion and speak on dark subjects. If your child is 16 and younger and they are watching this channel, very obviously parental supervision is very much advised. Initiating and maintaining conversations can be challenging for autistic individuals. Yes and no. Yes and no. I find that in particular, if it is in an area of, as they like to call it, special interest for me, it is not difficult at all for me to be able to start the conversation or even maintain the conversation. There do come points, and you can see it on my channel during my lives, where I start talking at instead of to people. I do try to watch that as best as I can. I know I'm guilty of it. But when it comes to the overall, the nice little nothings that neurotypicals expect, the meaningless conversations about the weather, which makes people so happy, I'm not so great with that. Most of us don't care to be. We feel like if you're going to open your mouth, it has to be because what you're about to say is worth saying. Sue us, right? What we're not good at is those societal niceties that are unspoken, that everybody gets mad at us because we don't automatically magically know them the way that neurotypicals do. Because, once again, boys and girls, we're not neurotypical. How that affects the workplace, however, is here's this strange dichotomy. If you are like an autistic like myself, what I have been told is I am so good at what my aunt aptly dubbed at the horse and pony show that I'm good to the point it shoots me in my own foot. Which means when I am in a work arena, and it's in a work arena that isn't a special interest of mine, and you are dealing with managers, customers, what have you, and particularly in sales where you have to be able to build rapport, whether it's over the phone or face to face. Yeah, people don't understand why this vibrant, very communicative person suddenly clams up, right? Because they are so used to seeing the mask that in an area where maybe the mask isn't so well cultivated, they're not used to seeing it fail so badly. They can't, there's no reference for them between the person that they see when they're coaching and the individual that's out on the phone, because coaching is targeted to deal with specific issues. When you're on the phone, it's not so targeted, you know? And they wonder, how are you failing so badly in this area? When I see you, you're vibrant, you're communicative, you're funny, you could be charming and even witty. What they're not comprehending is at the end of the day, no matter how good my mask is, there's always just that something slightly off, isn't there? It also, when you see someone and they can mask so well, and then you see the failings in areas such as small talk when it's not an area of special interest, that it doesn't really compute. You know? How can this person who can communicate with me so well have such difficulty, right? Right? Because just because one may be good at masking does not mean they are good at masking in every capacity of their lives. But when a person only sees one version of you, and then they are confronted with the truth of their diagnosis and where the areas are going to be difficult, it sometimes can be difficult, particularly with those who are not well versed in autism and only have the Cliff Notes version, to be able to understand that. Okay? So, what is the key here? Ironically, communication. You don't need to just do the full disclosure once if you're going to be successful out in the job market. What I've discovered is sometimes you have to do full disclosure, even to the same individual, over and over and over again to remind them and elaborate upon what the difficulties are. So, just like with any form of medical treatment, then you can then build an honest plan of attack, as it were, which is why my numbers have doubled within a week. And although the sword of Damocles is still there, it's just a little bit higher off my neck today. Okay? Managers are not going to automatically know to do this, especially those who haven't had a whole lot of exposure to people like us, in particular within the workplace parameters. All right? So, a simple answer, sometimes even in complicated situations, is the right answer. You got to remind them, right? Because managers aren't going to magically know these things. Now, this is for the managerial side. I just wanted to get that out there. Now, for you managers, something you need to understand. Some of us individuals, especially those of us Gen X autistics who are managed to survive and are still around, you also need to wrap your brain around, again, the concept that you know nothing. Okay? Just because I can engage in a one on one very vibrantly, charmingly, wittingly, I don't see it, but these are things I've been told by other people. Doesn't mean I'm going to be like that in every single capacity. Understand that no matter how good I am at being able to communicate one on one, at the heart of the matter is part of my diagnosis is still massively communication. When you understand that, managers, and you can wrap your brain around it, this will be the time when you would encourage the autistic to start talking. What is it that is tripping them up in this interaction with the customer, right? Obviously, there's some kind of communication thing that's going on. So, the best thing you can do as a manager is get them talking about it. What's going through their head when they are talking to the individual? What is going through their head while they trip all over small talk? What's going through their head when their communication suddenly becomes incredibly stunted? Just kind of like a full behavioral assessment, it sets a baseline so that you can come up with a plan of attack. All right. Some individuals may struggle with taking turns in dialogues, interrupting others, or knowing when to speak, which can lead difficulty to holding conversations or interacting smoothly in social settings. This is all more true, folks, when you are in a social setting that you've never been in before. You don't even remotely know what the secret rules that neurotypicals know are, let alone being able to follow them. Okay? What this means is, and you've seen it on my channel often enough, I have a very, very, very bad habit of talking over other people when a point suddenly hits my head. I'm not disregarding the other person when this is happening. I am not in any way trying to make that person feel disrespected or railroaded. It's been this way since I was a little kid. I'm going to have an idea, and there is no filter between my brain and my mouth. And even if you're in the middle of explaining something, it's still going to come out. Right? Right? It happens. I have found a good way, both on the phones and in real life in different arenas, that immediately calling yourself out, saying, hey, this is something that I struggle with. I apologize. I mean, no disrespect. I am sorry this idea occurred while I was listening to you. There is no filter between my brain and my mouth. Most people tend to be pretty understanding. Managers, you need to be kind of understanding here in a way that doesn't rub us the wrong way. A simple holding up of the hand, like, hey, that's a good point, but I need you to listen here. Wouldn't you know it, I shut my mouth. Crazy, right? Me shutting my mouth. There's been a miracle. Somebody called the Vatican. Ugh. Interrupting others or knowing when to speak and when to shut up. That is my number one problem. It is literally getting me to shut up. That's the trick, right? And interacting smoothly in social settings. I think this is by and large why I didn't really get to spread my social wings and get as good as I am today, was once I got in a whole room with other people who are doing the exact same thing. And everybody's talking at each other and to each other, and nobody's offended. And weirdly enough, everybody's getting heard somehow. That's what I mean. The liberation of being in a room full of your own people is not a feeling I can really describe. You have to experience it. And weirdly, it does help because you become strangely aware of the way that you communicate and the way your kind can understand you, but you can also kind of catch where a neurotypical may not be as receptive. But you get what I'm saying there. This means, folks, that we're managers, not that we're not listening to you, because we are. Doesn't mean we are disrespecting you or ignoring your point. It means that for some of us, for me, I should have it like a wild coyote freaking sign. Some of us don't know when to shut up. I am point blank a shining example of she who never shuts up. All right? Which is detrimental in some neurotypical circles. I've gotten better over the years. It helps depending on the setting of the social event that's going on. I have found that when I'm in official capacity going out to speak, I've gotten a lot better afterwards in regards to networking and being able to shut my mouth and listen by simply shouting what I'm thinking very loudly in my head. But yeah, what we need to get from this, managers, is we are not trying to be disrespectful. We are not trying to be subordinate. This is just one of the areas you have to understand that we have difficulties in. And so, in understanding it, finding gentle ways instead of more brutal ways to quiet us without stressing us out is going to help clear up a lot of communication issues. And also, managers, if you are unsure because of these difficulties, whether or not that they're hearing what you're saying, you're comprehending what's being asked of us. Pardon me, one moment, allergies. Excuse me. Have us repeat it back to you. My old job with the state actually pulled that experiment during a conference that we had. I believe it was one of the massive ones out in Osage Beach. For the first keynote, they had me eyes glued to the stage. They asked me what was said during their keynote, and I couldn't tell them shit because my head was too preoccupied with giving all the right, proper societal cues that I was doing what everyone else was doing. Therefore, because all my brain power was focused on that, I didn't really hear or wrap my brain around anything that was said. Then, for the closing keynote speech, they handed me my phone, piece of paper, let me doodle. And then they came back and told me to repeat everything in regards to that keynote speech. And I could have given them a pamphlet. All right. So don't assume just because we have these issues that what you're telling us is not being heard, not being respected, and not at least having an attempt of being implemented. Keep that in your head. It will also help you notice that there might be some small underlying issues that you're missing because of this. Let's continue, shall we? Choosing appropriate topics for conversation and maintaining conversational relevance can be difficult for some autistic individuals. In other words, it's forever the neurotypicals judging us. Sorry, I'm going to be blunt about this one. Do you know how many times I've been told to not talk about the JRC because it's not our turn? I shit you not. My favorite was when someone came on to me back when I had a Tumblr who said, "Shut your mouth, it's not your house on fire right now." Bruh, my house has been on fire for over 3 fucking decades. How long do those kids have to wait and patiently endure being tortured before it's their turn? Because if we sit around and wait around for when the rest of the world tells us we can speak, we're going to be long dead and gone. And they're still not going to be ready for us. All right? The whole appropriate, but sometimes other autistics, like, they'll bring up like weird sexual topics out of nowhere at a societal event where it's not polite. Okay, this is true. That's fair enough. I understand that. And maintaining conversational relevance. This is neurotypical bullshit 101. Neurotypicals live with this idea that if it's not relevant to them, it's not relevant to anyone, and they can't understand why they're stuck in this conversation. Believe me, if you could see the tired on my face, yeah, that. Okay? The neurotypicals tend to judge something as irrelevant if it doesn't have anything to do with them. If someone tries to talk to a neurotypical about the shit going on at the JRC, they usually go of two ways. It's either so horrible and horrifying that it stops their brain and they will literally bury their heads in the sand to keep from being that viciously jarred and hurt by what's going on. And the other group of individuals are like, well, you're disabled, so who cares what happens to you? What exact value do you bring to the world anyway? I have rarely met an in between. Very rarely. And literally every single last one of them are either in the movement or if they've worked in the field or both. Okay? Now, that being said, there are times where we will bring up shit that is out of left field, that took a turn in a left field, and went left all the way to Timbuktu, did a double backflip in Middle Earth, ended up in Narnia, and somehow we're here. Okay? At least it would be so to the neurotypical brain. Autistics can see strange patterns that don't make sense to really anybody else but us. But the weird thing about that, give it some time, we usually tend to be right at least about 95% of the time. So just because you don't understand how it can be relevant to the topic at hand doesn't mean it's not relevant. However, in situations like me where I could take a subject and somehow take it into left to another left through Narnia to Timbuktu through Arda, I get it. All right. It is extremely confusing to bosses. The uncomfortable chuckle, right? And this can end in awkward situations. So, managers, what do I want you to realize? The autistic brain makes connections that the neurotypical brain is never going to make. We're going to see patterns that neurotypicals can't even see. It may not be something that you feel is relevant to the situation at hand. The answer is not to belittle us and say, okay, what does that have to do with anything? Because more than likely, we are hyper defensive of ourselves. As we get older, it becomes even more so, and we tend to double down. I have found, and my mom is the queen of it. Yeah, okay. Okay. Back to the topic at hand, right? It's all you gotta do. It's almost like a knock on the head. Hey, Tiff, that's interesting and all. Maybe we'll talk about it another time, but we need to be focusing on this right now. If done gently, no animosity or anything, it opens up the communication again, doesn't it, managers? It's a gentle shove, not the slap in the face. Because then, when you do the slap in the face approach, I get offended, you get offended, and nobody goes home happy, and numbers get tanked if you're in sales. Or work relationships go that much further down the toilet. You get more flies with sugar than acid. Screw it. My analogies suck. I'm not awake yet. You get what I'm saying here, right? That gentle redirect. That's very interesting, and it's kind of like the brush off when you get one of those talkers on the phone. That's very interesting, and I definitely like to look into that at another time. But we need to be focusing here and start from there. You can do it in a pointed, firm manner without hitting our offensive bone. I know this because my current manager has been doing it for over the last week. This is the new one, and seemed to immediately wrap her brain around how do we redirect the Tiffany so that I don't offend her and she doesn't come across her numbers, but also in a way that I don't get pissed, right? Gentle but firm redirect. Okay? Some people may struggle to follow social cues and conversational norms, leading to awkward silences or irrelevant talk. Here we go with the irrelevancy again. What neurotypical hate people hate more than anything is info dumping. What autistic people love more than anything, in fact, it's almost unanimously our love language, is info dumping. Because we can't comprehend that anyone would not find this information as fascinating as we do. And wouldn't they like to go as in depth as we did? Like, it does not compute in our heads that these people are like, okay, but what does that have to do with the price of beans in Taiwan? Right? Now, a lot of these social cues they're talking about is something that neurotypicals have this mysterious ability to innately just have embedded into their DNA somehow. We do not. In fact, so many social faux pas have made up the entirety of my school career as to be a how-to guide on how to piss neurotypicals off, kamikaze any form of popularity you may have had of all for 5 minutes, and how to permanently make sure that you are a loner at the lunch table for the rest of your life unless you can find a group of misfits just like you. I found the group of misfits. Boy, were they fun. This is why I continue to like misfits. The throwaways. I'm one of those. Thing about throwaways, though, we always come back like a boomerang, right? Sorry, I'm getting off topic here, but what we're learning here going over conversation, initiation, and maintenance is the way autistics communicate, our form of communication, how we engage in conversation, and our own, I like to call them atypical social cues, are not even remotely the same to that of the neurotypical. As a manager, I know with the Cliff Note version, you understand that. However, when it comes to practical application within the workplace, it becomes a different animal, particularly if you're dealing with an individual who is usually, in the most ways, pretty good at masking. And suddenly you have a dichotomy, a difference between what the numbers may say if you're in sales and what you are experiencing during those one-on-one coachings or one-on-one meetings with your boss. You get where I'm going, right? So, managers, you've got to keep in the back of your heads that at the end of the day, no matter how good we are at communicating with you during one on ones or during coaching or just a job conversation regards to productivity, just because we are very good at one on one with you does not mean that we still do not have significant communication difficulties, in particular dealing with other neurotypicals. Okay? Always keep that in the back of your head because then when you're on your one on ones, the numbers will start making a hell of a lot more sense. With that knowledge, go into the meeting with that and then take a look at the numbers and talk to your autistic employee what is going through their head at the time while that's happening, while we're engaged. More often than not, we are observational to the point of insanity, even to our own selves. And we will tell you, if you give us a moment to think about it, what's going through our heads at the time, what we think is going on at the very least, and you can start troubleshooting from there, right? The same goes for a sales job as it is for a waiter or server, as it is if you're working construction. In spite of the fact I keep using sales because it's my primary what I know at the moment, it covers just about everything, right? Also, what we learn is a simple, direct, but firm redirect. When we get in that kind of info dumping kind of mood, or we start talking to you about connections you can't see, that's very interesting. And I'd like to go in depth with you at some point in time. But right now, we need to focus on this subject. Once we get this taken care of, we get this corrected, we will go on and we will look at that and we'll move in there, right? It's a simple redirect that offends no one and tends to get more productivity out of the employee. We're going to go ahead and close on that one, folks. We don't get very many views on this channel. The few we do tend to get removed from time to time. So you know the drill, folks. Please don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and don't forget to utilize those comments. I appreciate your time. And as always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea do hope you have a good one. I'll see you next time. Bye bye, everyone.